Good evening, everybody. I'm Andre Goodman, Youth Program Manager here at United Way of the Midlands. I'd like to welcome all the viewers. Thank you for joining the Wellness and Family Panel discussion as part of our Youth and Resiliency Training Series. Although the pandemic has taken a backseat to the civil unrest and social injustice that is dominating the headlines in our country right now, we still felt that it was important to acknowledge the concerns and discomforts that has accompanied the COVID-19. United Way of the Midlands has put together a great panel of experts to offer some tips to navigate the added stress and anxieties that the coronavirus has brought about, and also remind everyone the importance of prioritizing the health and wellness of our families. I'd like to encourage the viewers to submit any questions in the live comment box, and we'll address them as they come about and attempt to answer some of the pre-submitted questions as well. I've had the pleasure of getting to know the ladies that are a part of the panel over the last few weeks, and I think we're lucky to have them here tonight. Debbie Greenhouse, pediatrician with Palmetto Pediatrics and Adolescent Clinic, is also a part of the teaching faculty at University of South Carolina School of Medicine. Kristine Hobbs is the mental health integration coordinator for the Department of Health and Human Services, and she's charged with integrating mental health into pediatric practices. Callee Boulware is the executive director of Reach Out and Read, an organization that incorporates books and family reading into the pediatric practices. I say all that to essentially say I'm probably the only expert or non-expert involved in the discussion tonight. I played professional football for a decade, but I never took any snaps at quarterback. So this is the first time I'm leading any huddle. I'm asking you to forgive me ahead of time for my inexperience, but like to welcome the ladies as well. Thank you all for agreeing to be a part of the panel. And I want to start off just by asking how you all are doing with any of the adjustments that you've had to make in your families over the past few months due to the pandemic.
You want to take that? I'll go ahead and start off there, I suppose. So it's been an interesting adjustment. I have two daughters. One is in medical school in Atlanta, so she has stayed there at school and actually just went back on her clinical rotations this week. My other daughter is a law student at the University of Michigan who came home when the university closed down and finished the second year of law school in the hammock in our backyard. And is still home now doing an internship for the Richland County Public Defenders, possibly going to Alaska to work for their public defenders service soon. But it's been very different. It's been very stressful. I work in a pediatric practice. That obviously has been quite stressful as well, trying to make sure that we are providing as safe an environment as we can and trying to deal with the multiple stressors that arise in ourselves, our families, and our patients and their families. So it's been a very different environment, and I think that's true for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Greenhouse, we started, when we started to put this panel together, we were discussing some of the panic that some of the parents had involving following up with some of their pediatric visits. What have been some of the biggest changes you've seen as a pediatrician over the past 2.5, 3 months regarding parents and getting them encouraged to follow up with those pediatric visits for their kids?
So one of the scariest things that we have seen is that families have not come in for well baby visits and immunizations for infants who truly need those immunizations. And it is not that these are, quote, anti-vax families or that they actually have concerns about the vaccines for the most part. It's simply that they're terrified to leave their house. They're terrified to come to our office, even though we've put so many precautions in place to make sure that they're safe. And as a result, the immunization rates for infants and young children in South Carolina have plummeted to a point where we probably have herd immunity against absolutely nothing at this point. I saw some numbers today on an earlier call with South Carolina DHHS looking at immunization rates for children with Medicaid in South Carolina, and to say that they are appalling would be an absolute understatement. This is statewide. So we're really, really making an effort to reach out to our families when they miss these appointments. We're calling them personally to explain to them how important it is that we prevent these diseases that we can prevent, and that we don't let our fear of a disease that we can't control allow us to be overtaken by outbreaks of diseases that we can control. We also try to explain to them that for the most part, infants and young children don't tend to get severe illness from coronavirus. Adults tend to get much more severe illness. Children get the disease far less frequently, and when they do get it, for the most part, they get far less ill.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate that response, Dr. Greenhouse. I know it's over the last few months, it's been hard to kind of break some of the bad habits that come about from not having the opportunity to maintain routine, just based on, the unemployment rate has risen. The economy is not in the same condition as it was before the pandemic hit. Kristine, can you kind of speak to the importance of having that routine, maintaining proper sleep habits, eating healthy, and also maintaining physical activity throughout your day so you can kind of retain some of that positive energy that alleviates some of the fear that most parents probably are dealing with right now?
Yeah, all of our schedules have been turned upside down. When you asked how your life has changed, I came whatever that Friday was in March 12th. I came home and haven't been back in the office other than to pick up my supplies. Had a student move back home. One of my kids moved back home from college. Had a kid who was in high school and had just made one of the JV teams, and we left one of his JV matches, and he thought it's going to be a long weekend, and they haven't been back at school. So we've had to adjust to some of the online learning. Have a bonus child that is supposed to be getting married this weekend, and we've had to turn a whole wedding around in a 3-week time frame. So those are very small challenges compared to some of the challenges that other people have had. But I think everybody has been affected, which is different than when South Carolina experiences a hurricane, and then we can look to our sister states to provide support. In this situation, we're all struggling. So some of the things that we know as human creatures that we like to have habits or routines or structure of some fashion. Some people are extremely structured, and people that do really well in military environments are extremely structured, but even people who are much more laid back appreciate some type of routine. So what I heard an expert encourage, have 3 touch points a day that are routine for your family. If that's getting up in the morning at a certain time and eating a meal together, or taking a morning walk, or sitting out on the deck, but something that is the routine for the family that's kind of like lays out the plan of what you're going to do for the day. Some point midday to have a touch point, and then another point in the evening, whether that's eating a meal together, reading a story before bath time or bedtime. Some of those routines we think of are more important for our littlest people, but they're important for all of us. A lot of people are struggling with their sleep right now because you go to sleep and there's so many things going on in your brain. But we do know that turning off screens, preferably 2 hours before you go to bed, is extremely helpful. I had one of my kids, I encouraged him to do it in the summer, and a couple days later, he's like, "Dang, Mom, that's like magic." And so if you can get your kids to do it, or you can do it yourself and get the benefit of it, it really would help. Eating healthy, everybody's out of their routine, and things like drinking your morning coffee and going into the office, and having similar things for lunch, and now you're at home and you're making it's like these kids have to eat again. We just fed them. Like, you feed them breakfast, and then you got to feed them lunch because they're still home with you, and then you got to feed them dinner because they're still home with you. Like, no, they're not going anywhere. They're right there. They want to eat all the time. And so setting up some routines around expectations for snacks. And one of the questions that came in was helping balance that your kids are home and you're having to work.
Right.
And this isn't magic, and some families are better about it than others. But if you think about the way daycares are structured, or schools are structured, or camps are structured, they have a structure in the day. And within that day, you have a time that you meet as a group, and then you do an activity, and then you might have a lesson, and then you might eat and have some rest and have an activity. And so even if you're not by nature structured, if you can structure your day in some way so that the kids know, we're going to watch our show this morning, and then we're going to go take a walk around the block, or we're going to have a half an hour outside. And then we're going to come in and we're going to have a little bit quiet because mom and dad are going to work, so that everybody knows what the expectation is.
Right.
And sharing that and pictures, even like doing a little picture chart, doesn't have to be anything fancy, or asking your kids, what would you want your day to look like? I have to work. You don't have school anymore. You want to go to the pool. This is what has to happen for me before we can do this for you. So that you're all a team, going back to the team image, you know, you're not your kids everything and they're not yours. But right now we're all having to work as a team. And sometimes you got to play with them and be the friend. And sometimes you got to be the parent. And sometimes you got to be the teacher. And sometimes you got to be the dance instructor. But they also can take on some of those roles too, and sometimes help with the things that you need to get done so that you can go do the things they want to do.
Yeah. And I didn't realize how much I missed being on a structured schedule and having a routine till it wasn't there. And it definitely changes your energy. I mean, it feels like a shock to the body because you build up so many muscle memories that you get used to doing certain things at certain parts of the day. And the energy that provides alone is healthy enough to help you keep your focus throughout the day. So sometimes when those things are not in place, it definitely is a disturbance mentally and physically. I've been trying to keep my 8-year-old more so than any of my other kids on his proper schedule and trying to get him to go to bed at the proper time. He feels like he's been on summer break for the last 2.5 months, and he's always been addicted to the screens. But we actually had time that after he was done with school, we would always permit him 2 hours after school to kind of do his video games, go on YouTube before he started his homework. And then he knew around 7 o'clock when it was time to like shower and get ready for bed. His body was used to that. But when that was no longer present, it's like he's in summer camp all day long at home. And it's kind of hard to get him to refocus sometimes during the day. So, Callee, just kind of speaking to what Kristine was mentioning earlier about having that family time. Can you speak to the importance of disconnecting from those screens and, you know, kind of having that intimate time with your family as opposed to, you know, always being on your computer, always being disengaged from the individuals that are in front of you? Like, what can you kind of speak to the importance of having that intimate time as a family?
Sure. And I think to Kristine's point, and something that we have all felt during this time is that it's really hard to make those sort of barriers between times, because we are working from home and we are expected to be available and checking our things and checking our email, right? So even if we try in a normal circumstance to be disconnected from screens when we are home together as a family, it's different because we are all home now. Everybody's using the screens to get their school and work done. But I think the really important thing that we try to help families remember is that when the screens are open, the screens are, you know, generally not facilitating what we like to call serve and return behavior, right? Where something is happening, something is said, and then there's a response. So when a child looks at a picture or comments on a story or talks about something going on, it ends up being a little bit flat. So the more we can turn the screens off and spend some time in conversation, telling a story about our day, talking about my kids and I they're teenagers and we still do roses and thorns every night. What are the things you loved about today? What are the things that were tough about today? Getting a book out, regardless of the age, and just spending a little bit of time uninterrupted. We talk a lot about children on screens, and that's a really important conversation and definitely one that we should be having. But we also need to think about our own behavior as adults on screens. And are we spending some time non-distracted, totally engaged with what our child is telling us and letting them know we're interested? Now, the other thing I think is really important to talk about here, because we've all had these moments, especially in the last 2.5 or 3 months, is at the end of that long day, you're worn out. Sometimes your patience is thin and you don't have a lot of it left, right? So what we try to think a lot about is some of those moments in the time in the day that it works best for you. If it works great at night and you can build it into bedtime routines, that's an awesome time. You're tapped out at the end of the night and you just can't do it, build in another time during the day that it's going to work for you and you can have those moments. And what I can say for myself as a parent is that when I do that and when I find that time to sit down and be non-distracted with a screen and talk with my kids, I feel like we've done some winning that day. And all the other difficulties of the day, we've done some winning. And we've built something together that gives us a little bit of that positive energy to get through tomorrow. So even if there's small moments, build the moments with you without a screen and your child without a screen, just to be together.
And just so to make sure that we're answering some of the questions that we're getting from our audience, that the structured schedule that we're talking about, trying to keep the kids busy but keeping them disconnected from the screens for families who are trying to find that balance between self-care, childcare, and obviously having those intimate moments with the families. How do you suggest trying to find that balance and keeping those while keeping the kids busy and finding activities to keep the kids busy? Because I think for most families, especially, from two-parent homes that are working full-time, it's hard to kind of keep that structured routine and schedule. And sometimes they're older kids versus younger kids. So finding that balance is tough. So what advice do you offer to those parents?
I want to piggyback on something that Callee said, and it was advice that was given to me when my children were young. And I know the American Academy of Pediatrics has some information about it, but basically it's special time and having some time every day that you spend with your child. Now, if you have 3 or 4 or 5 kids and you're a single parent, that's going to be really difficult. And you may not be able to do it every day. You may spread it out over days, but for that child to know, I'm going to have your attention for this amount of time. No matter what the behavior has been like for the rest of the day, for 10 or 20 minutes, whatever it is that you decide on, that child's going to have your attention and they get to choose what you do. Mm-hmm. Now, I had a child, we did this, that wanted to play school. That was dreadful. It was absolutely dreadful. He would put a blanket on in the living room and we had to sit on the floor and be the students. But I learned so much about what was happening in his classroom by participating in that activity. So really the only rules are that there's no screens. The kids get to direct the time and there's a structured amount of time. And sometimes when you do that, that takes care of some of the other problems that you have. And not just for your little children, but for your older children too. Like you were, for a child who may have more independence, a teenager, still having those check-in points that we're going to start the day at a certain time. I'm going to wake you up. I'm going to come in your room, or you're going to come downstairs and we're going to have breakfast and you're going to tell me what you're doing and I'm going to tell you what I'm doing. And then around lunchtime, are you going to be home? Are you going to be working? What are you going to be doing? And what are you going to be doing throughout the day? And then another check-in in the evening. That's going to be very different than a young child who that picture chart may be really important. And you can say, we're going to have our special time right here after lunch, but I'm going to do my thing now and you're going to do your thing now, as age appropriate as that can be.
Yeah.
Thank
you. And the same thing. And when you do that and you have that special time with that child, it's also easier to explain to them, now mom's going to take her special time. Mm-hmm. And I used to tell my kids, I'm not a mom after 9 o'clock. Unless you're on fire or you're throwing up, I'm not a mom after 9 o'clock. Now, they were older and they were like, you're always a mom. But it was, in our family, that was a way to communicate. I'm going to go in my room now and read my book. Yeah. And unless you really need me, this is my time. So we have to teach and model that.
Yeah.
That boundary with our kids.
I think that's a great point. And I'll throw in one quick thing, and then Dr. Greenhouse, I'll let you go. I'm sure you talk about this a lot. But one of the things, we have 15 members of our team, and we all work from home usually, but having everybody's young children at home with them has been a really different experience. So we've been talking a lot about this, even as a team, and how we're handling the days and how we're doing things. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is advice that I got to when my children were younger, which is a little bit about the power of boredom as well. And sort of the caution that you don't have to constantly entertain your young children, except, but rather give them interesting, stimulating things in their environment where they can use their imagination. And it's been fun to watch my members of our team who have very young children sort of adapt that over the weeks, and their children have really gotten used to really loving some of that free play, using their imaginations, using their creativity, and then, sort of experiencing the joy of some of that down and unstructured time. So I think that unstructured time is hard, but unstructured time can also be a great thing. So sort of knowing as a parent where that balance is can be tough. We think we need to keep them entertained. But it was just good advice to remember a little bit.
Dr. Greenhouse, you're on mute.
I would totally agree with that. I can't tell you how many families I hear from now where the parents are just incredibly stressed because they are now working from home. The kids are now at home. Until this past week, the kids were supposed to be doing these huge mountains of schoolwork that the kids felt totally overwhelmed by, the parents felt totally overwhelmed by. And in a lot of cases, because they were so overwhelmed, it just wasn't getting done. And for some of these kids, it's actually still not done.
Right.
And I found that I think telling folks, it's okay for this not to be perfect. I think that makes a huge difference.
Huh.
And one phrase that I've always liked is that perfect is the enemy of good.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think in this type of scenario, the goal needs to be good. The goal doesn't need to be perfect. And I think we can get families to understand that everyone is struggling here, that everyone needs to work together. And I've really encouraged them, go ahead and have a family meeting at least once a week where everybody talks about, okay, in the next week, what do you want to get done? What's the one thing you really want to see happen? You ask each person that. And then you also ask them, what are the things you really don't want to happen this week? Things that you're afraid of or things that you think might happen. And each family member really kind of gets an idea of what's going on in the other person's head in that way. And they can kind of come up with a game plan for the week. Having that game plan for the week really seems to give people more of a sense of a little bit of control over a situation that's really, really hard to control right now. The other thing I've encouraged folks to do is keep what I call a good book. And this is as simple as can be. But for kids who are really scared and think there's just nothing good out there right now and nothing to look forward to, and a lot of kids are telling me they can't see beyond this. They can't see anything good here. You keep a little notebook. If everybody in the family gets a little notebook, and each day you write down 2 things in your good book. 2 good things that you thought about today, or 2 good things that you did, or 2 good books that you read, or something good that you read in a book. And you write that down, and at the end of the day, everybody talks about what they wrote in their good book. And I mean, it's simple as can be, but I've had some families that have just done so much better with that, because it gives them something to look towards at the end of the day when everybody has been so stressed out trying to figure out, okay, you're doing this, you're doing that, but wait, I need to be working. And in some cases, it's easier for the parent who's working outside the home versus the one who's working in the home. But then the one outside the home is terrified that they may be bringing something bad in the home.
Right.
Yeah.
So that good book at the end of the day really tends to help a whole lot, just as far as alleviating some of that minute to, hey, let's relax, let's talk about this, and let's try and feel a little better.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it, maybe this is just me, I've kind of learned to embrace the uncertainty because, not understanding that I'm not in control of all things and making peace with that has been healthy for me. But are there ways to kind of help kids build their tolerance for uncertainty while keeping worry to a minimum? And if so, what are the ways to do that?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that, that the way we talk about that a lot is resilience, right? It's our ability to handle stress. And there are stressors in life that are positive stressors that are the pressure of a test in school, the pressure of, trying out for a team, or even certain pressures that are manageable. And those pressures are manageable because of the relationships that we have around us. So I think it's really important to remember that children will develop that resilience through the relationships and the supportive and caring adults that are around them. So something that I've been thinking a lot about during this time is really controlling some of the stress or the anxiety as much as possible that we as adults are passing on to children, the information that they may be getting and things, and just reaffirming them with us and our relationships and letting them know we don't know all of these things, but I'm here and we're going to handle this together and I'm with you and you're not going to be alone and we're going to do, giving them that supportive relationship that makes them feel comfortable, and then also the routines and the repetition in their day to build some of that resilience as well. It's what we talk about all the time with a story at night. It sounds simple, sounds too simple sometimes, but I still find it to be magical. There's a way to kind of center ourselves as a family and let the kids know I'm here, this is here every day, and you're good. I got you.
Just kind of following up, Kristine, with the centering of the families and trying to bring about that balance and the refocus. How do you, just speaking to tools and skills such as mindfulness and healthy breathing exercises, how do you encourage families to kind of incorporate that as part of their day to help recenter and alleviate some of the stress and the worry and anxiety that has kind of taken over the world at this point?
Well, I do. I wanted to comment on both Callee and Dr. Greenhouse's responses, and I think for Dr. Greenhouse, just to piggyback on what she said about her good book, that it doesn't have to be a book. It could literally just be a plastic cup that you sit in the middle of the table and you write on a piece of your napkin something good that happened that day. So what works for your family? It might be everybody going to the Dollar Tree and picking out their book and having their book. That might seem like overwhelming to you, just the thought of having to give everybody a book. But just get a plastic cup or the dog's bowl or a bag that you've got from the grocery, like a paper sack. That these ideas are things you can just take and integrate into your own family life. I do think that we as parents, and I've had some different parenting experiences, we get overwhelmed. And this goes back to what Callee was saying about, instead of what we want to do as parents is lend our calm to our children. But sometimes what we do is we lend our franticness to our children in the midst of, we got to get here, we got to get there, we got to do this, we got to do that, I've got to get this done, you've got to leave me alone so I can get this done, and all of that energy and trying to just get it all done. That's where that special time can come in, because it's just like this, we're just going to be together right now. That's what we're going to do. But for yourself, I think it really is important for you to think about some strategies as a parent that you can do to calm yourself down and ground yourself. And then how you do those with your children will be based on what your children need. One really simple thing to do when you're feeling really frantic is just to stop and think about your five senses. What is something that I see right now? I see my computer screen with these other people on it. What is something that I hear right now? I hear a faint echo back in my headphones, but it's much better than it was when I didn't have my headphones on. What's something that I feel right now? I feel myself sitting on my hands and I'm leaning forward into the screen. What's something I smell right now? I smell the remnants of my supper. So just in doing that and like bringing yourself back into the space that you are in. Often the space that we are in is not as stressful as the place that we imagine we might be in, or that we're predicting we're going to be in. And so those grounding exercises help you kind of get back in. And then a simple breathing exercise. We did this with a couple different ones, but one that is my favorite one, and is to imagine, and it's kind of odd in the middle of the summer to be doing it, but just think about what it might be like by Christmas time, okay, or the middle of the winter. And if you had a cup of hot chocolate in your hands and you're just holding that hot chocolate and that cup is so warm, if you'd like to participate, just encourage you, just kind of get a little bit comfortable and pretend like you're holding that cup of hot chocolate. And with the cup of hot chocolate, you're going to put it up to your mouth and you realize that cup is really hot. That hot chocolate smells so good. So I'm going to smell that hot chocolate and breathe it in through my nose deep all the way down until I get that breath all the way down into my belly. I can almost feel the warmth of that hot chocolate in my belly, but I really want to drink it. So I'm going to blow that hot chocolate. And if you want to, you can close your eyes and do this with me. You're holding your hot chocolate, your warm hot chocolate, up to your mouth. You feel the heat of it. It might be tea, it might be coffee, whatever is your hot beverage of choice. And you're going to smell it deep all the way until you feel your belly rise, all the way to the bottom of your belly. And hold it. Hold that warmth. And then blow. And then again, breathe that hot chocolate all the way down into the bottom of your belly. And then hold it. And then blow. Now, if you participated in that activity, you may feel a sense of calm within you. And that is because what Daniel Siegel calls that if this is your brain, often when we're scared or frightful, we operate from the center of our brain, which is the amygdala, and that is our fight or flight response. But our brain is full of so many different connections that if we have strong connections in other places, we can often operate from our frontal lobe, which is the part that gives us time to think and respond. So what that breathing activity just did was it got you out of your amygdala and into the other parts of your brain to calm you down. Biologically, that's what happened. But in order for that to happen, you have to breathe in deep, and then you have to blow that air out through your mouth. I don't know why. That's just what they say works. And it works for me. Dr. Greenhouse can tell you all the biology about it. But we as parents sometimes need to take our own time out before we respond to our kids. And sometimes what that timeout looks like at my house is, I'm not really in a good place right now, and I can't talk to you about that. And it's probably not about you. It's about something else going on with me. So I've got to take my own time out. And it also gives our children permission to do it too.
Right.
So that's, the grounding exercise, counting what's around you, looking to find all of the blue things that you can find in a room, whatever is something that moves you out of that frantic piece and back into, I'm the adult here. I'm the one in charge. I'm not going to take control of the situation right now. I'm going to take control of myself right now, because that's all I really can control anyway. And once we do that and kind of get to a better place, just calm ourselves down. The world does look different. But Andre, back to your point, that's easier to do when we're getting good sleep.
Agreed.
We're getting good nutrition, and we've got some exercise during the day.
Yeah, and that breathing exercises reminds me of Savasana as part of yoga. Like at the end of yoga, I always feel relaxed because it allows you to kind of center yourself and get some of that deep breathing in. But it has always been refreshing for me. But just in speaking to some of those, connections that kind of tie into our self-care for parents that are kind of missing those social connections and kind of lend to their self-care, what advice or what activities do you even recommend for them that when they are trying to take care of their own wellness so they can be better for their families? What activities would any of you ladies recommend for those parents that are missing that social connection?
I think there are a lot of ways that they can still get that social connection. One of the things I'm trying to stress to people now is getting out of crisis mode, that we should be beyond crisis mode. And we now be trying to figure out our way to find a new normal. That new normal may not need to last very, very long, but I think for the time being, trying to focus on that new normal and trying to find new and different ways that we can get the social connection that we need is probably the best way to go. So every time I talk to a family, I tell them, okay, you need to look at your risks and your benefits. And you need to decide what activities you think are okay for you and for your family so that you can find that new normal and that you can find a way to be happy with the restrictions that we have right now. So it will look different for every family. It'll look different for each parent. It'll look different for each child, depending upon what their risks are and depending upon what their tolerance of risk is. So for family A, it may be that barbecue with the neighbors, where the one family is on one patio, the other family is on the next patio. They can see each other. They're 30 feet apart or something like that. They made their own barbecue, but they're talking across and they're having a good time and they're socializing. And that's where their comfort level lies. And they feel safe there. For the next family, it may be, okay, we're going to go to the protest at the State House with a bunch of friends, but we're going to stay fairly distant. But we're going to have that huge sense of community because there are hundreds of people there. We're going to try our best to stay distant. We're going to wear masks. But we feel like this is a safe thing for us to do, and that's how we're going to find our new normal in a bigger group. So the thing that I always try and stress is that the answer is not the same for any two families. Everybody has to look at this from their own perspective. The answer may not even be the same for two children in the same family, and it may not be the same for two parents in the same family because their temperament is a little bit different. I had a family today where the one child was really, really struggling because he's such an extrovert and he so wants to go to school and he so wants to play with his friends and he so wants to go bike riding. And then the other child, 2 years older, total introvert, has always been miserable in school. And she is as happy as a clam right now. And she doesn't ever want to go back to school. She just wants life to go on exactly the way it is right now. So everyone has to see this from their own perspective and figure out their own path forward as a family and then as an individual within that family. And that's one of the things that I've been trying to do on the phone, on telemedicine visits, in person, is help each family see that and help them kind of try and work through those decisions on their own to start building that new normal.
And just kind of leading into what that new normal may look like, especially after this weekend when, trauma has been compounded, not just with the pandemic, but like the civil unrest is, it feels unprecedented as well, like, and especially in my lifetime. So, with dealing with some of these communities that we're trying to build resilience in because they're so traumatized, what does the new normal look like after, like this weekend with some of the compounded stress and anxiety that's been brought about, with the social injustice protests, as well as still dealing with this pandemic? Like, what advice do you, not even advice, like, what do you offer in sense of encouragement for families that, trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, that compounded trauma? Like, what do you offer to parents that kind of keep them encouraged?
You want to take that? I think the best move there is telling folks, again, look for the positive. What are we hoping is going to come from this? What are we hoping is going to come from all of these protests? I would like to think that we're going to see true justice come from these protests. I would like to think that we are going to see a country where everybody is on the same page, where everybody is working for the same goals come from these protests. I think you can also use the protest as a background for a whole lot of family activities. I've been encouraging families to sit down and read about Martin Luther King. I've told a bunch of my adolescent patients, hey, there's a book I want you to go read. It's called Just Mercy. And I've actually had several of those kids send me messages or call me and say, oh my God, I just read that. It's the best book I've ever read in my entire life. And if anyone here hasn't read it, I would highly recommend it. It is amazing.
Yes.
But so I think you can take some of these horribly stressful events, and I think you can use them sort of as a jumping board for something good. I have to think that, because if you don't think that way, then there is no way to move forward with this. And I think that's what the protests are all about. It is to find that way to move forward, to do it as a group. I was actually, I was really, really happy with the protests until things devolved at the very end this weekend. But I still think that all in all, there were hundreds of people out there all working towards a common goal, all working toward justice. And that's awesome. And that's absolutely something that you can sit down and you can discuss with your family, and you can discuss with your kids on whatever level they are on. You can explain what justice means and what equality means and what racism means and what inequality means. And there's going to be books that will be appropriate at every single level for those kind of things that I'm sure Callee could speak to. But I think you just have to use those sorts of things as a jumping board. What can we make from this? How can we make something good come from this? Even the pandemic, there are good things from the pandemic. I've hiked the entire Peak to Prosperity passage and the watery passage of the Palmetto Trail with one of my kids because of the pandemic. Never would have done that otherwise, but we had nothing else to do on the weekend. And it was wonderful. And I tell people now what parks they can go to with their families where there won't be a lot of people, what trails they can go hike where there won't be a lot of people. Again, finding things they can do that maybe they wouldn't have done otherwise. And these are going to be the bright spots. These are going to be the things that they learn that might not have happened before.
I just want to say how much I agree with that, and how much I agree with the, even in the stress of the protests, I think that what we're demonstrating is that we have great things to fight for. Things are worth fighting for, and there's optimism in how we move forward with that. And that's something that I think a lot about in both of these situations, sort of that are concurrently happening for everybody right now, is the importance of optimism and belief in our future and belief in our children's future. And I think it's really important that we continue to find those bright spots, even if they're hard to look for in certain days, identify them, talk about them. We all need our good books, even adults, and find the moments in that day that are special. I love your example of more time spent together. Again, this is something I've heard from so many peers and colleagues and friends, is that it's really hard, but then, wow, look at all these moments that we've had dinner together. We've taken a walk after dinner. We've done all these things that are tough in a normal full schedule, we'll say. So what are the things that we want to keep from all of this in the new normal? We don't have to go back exactly the way it was. What are the things that we want to maintain and hold? And then at the base of all of it are the relationships that we have, right? So for communities that continue to experience trauma again and again, those relationships, the health of those relationships of the people around you will provide so much strength to transcend and be optimistic and move forward together.
And I'm going to take it from a little different perspective. And I think that I worked in the field of domestic violence for 14 years. So when you're talking about compounding trauma and you're leaving your television on, and you are continuing to see some very beautiful images, but also some very scary images. And children are seeing people that look like them, people that look like their parents, and people on both sides of the fence. I mean, children who are seeing people that look like them being pushed back or, touched in ways we wouldn't want. Children whose parents are first responders, children who may be families that could be on either side of the fence, and just showing. And then on top of that, I mean, my family, we are so blessed. Our biggest concern during the pandemic has been getting sick. But I have spent many, many hours myself and working with people who are the working poor, that you could be just one paycheck away from your whole place crumbling. And so listening to somebody talk about hiking a trail or reading a book, that may seem something so far away from where you are sitting right now. And so in that place, I really just want to ask you to think about, are you willing to ask for some assistance? We used to spend minutes of our 60 minutes together, 90 minutes together, begging women to go to a food bank because they had never done it before. or they may have been the women or the men who were donating food at the food bank. And so some of these services that are put in place to be safety nets are put in place for our safety right now. So if you've lost your job and you would benefit from some of the services of the United Way, contact the United Way and find out, how can I get some food? How can I get some rental assistance? How can I get some electricity assistance? This isn't going to be forever, but it is for right now. And what do you need right now? One of the things that we can do with our kids that's really powerful, Mr. Rogers used to say that his mother would tell him when something bad happened, look for the helpers. How can we be the helpers? Maybe we feel safe enough to go out and protest. Maybe we want to be the people who are handing out the water bottles. Maybe we have a voice. Maybe our children could draw pictures and send them to their elected officials or send them to people that they perceive. Ask your children, who do you think could help this situation? It might be their grandpa. It might be a faith leader. It might be their physician. It might be the neighbor across the street. Well, let me help you write a letter to that. Why don't you draw them a picture of what you would like for things to look like? That's very empowering for a child, for them to be able to, and it's very helpful for them to just get that out. But also, if you are more blessed, let's go donate to the food. Today, we're going to be the givers, because tomorrow we might be the ones who need. And talk about that as not either or, but we all at some point give, and we all at some point need to be able to take. And we talk about that in my family, about you have to be able to be a generous receiver also. Some of us are okay with the giving, but we don't want to be the one that gets. Right. And so in this time of uncertainty, I don't have the answer for you. I look at the world from where I sit, and I've sat with a lot of different people who've let me walk intimately in their lives for moments of time, but I don't know what it's like to be them. They don't know what it's like to be me, but we all want to be treated with respect and dignity and feel like somebody's got our back. So, I think those are some tangible things that you can do with children to make them feel more empowered. And if you're one of the people who has people that, it's not just the people who got sick from COVID, but it's also people who were sick before COVID that haven't been able to get their services. And that's pretty scary for a kid or a family if somebody in your family can't get help. And developmentally, I heard an expert say, and I never had thought about it, really until kids start looking for jobs or applying for colleges, a lot of them have never really had to deal with uncertainty. They've had a limited number of choices. They made a choice, and then you moved on with it. And then you graduate from high school, and it's like, oh, I got to get a job, and there's all these choices, and they might not want me. Or I've got to go to college, and there's all these choices, but I got to weigh how far away and how much money. So we as parents have to, some of that's just developmentally not there yet, But what is there is the ability to draw a picture, to write a note to somebody, to take some, if you're in a better, how can you share the things that are going okay with you and be the giver? And how can you accept if you need to be the receiver? And I also think we're not made to parent alone. So sometimes having if it's your best friend, in my life, one of my kids' extra person is my best friend. And one of my kids' extra people is his best friend's mom. So being okay with making sure that your kids have another trusted adult that they can bounce some of those ideas off of. Because sometimes they're mad at you.
Right.
So, also, and for you too. One of the things I've done with one of my good friends, we used to go meet for breakfast one Saturday a month. We go parking. If any of y'all know what that used to be. But we just go to the Kmart parking lot, and she sits in her car and I sit 6 feet away in my car, and we just sit there and talk for 3 hours. Because I don't want to be on a Zoom meeting because I'm on those all the time. But those are just some thoughts. I just want to acknowledge that it is hard right now. It is really hard for a lot of us. And we're seeing what's going on, and we don't have an answer. And I tell my kids all the time, if there was a simple answer, it wouldn't be a problem. Somebody would have already solved it. But what's my little piece of it? And where can I impact that little piece?
Do you ladies think it's possible to have the honest conversation with younger kids regarding, the fears of COVID-19 without inherently inflicting that fear on kids? Like, is there a way to have that honest conversation without, inadvertently transferring your concerns to them, but being clear, not just with obviously the pandemic, but also with the current circumstances?
I think that there is. I think that you have to know the child well enough to understand where they're coming from developmentally, and what level they are on. I think you have to know the family dynamics well enough to know how much anxiety was there to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's pretty easy to have a very honest conversation about coronavirus and the pandemic. And that honest conversation would include things, particularly talking to a young child, like saying, this is a virus that a lot of people are very afraid of. And sure, some people can get real sick from this virus, but most little kids don't get this virus. And if they do get this virus, they don't get very sick from it. Just for a young child, those simple, and those are true facts. Most kids don't get it, and most kids who do get it don't get very sick from it. It is far and away the minority of children that get very sick from this. Our children's hospital has essentially been almost empty throughout this entire pandemic. So I think just simple things like that. And then for the child who's slightly older, who may have seen a lot of the media spin on this, I think one of the most important things to tell them is simply that what they're seeing on the media is spin, and that regardless of what form of media you are looking at, that there's not a whole lot of truth there, that they are spinning it because that is what sells media. And if you look at, if you're watching CNN, they're spinning it in one direction. If you're watching Fox, they're spinning it in the other direction. There's not a lot of truth on either side. So for the older kids, if they really want to know the facts, I would strongly recommend that they actually look at things like the CDC, where you actually have some real data, or that they just ask me what their questions are, and I will give them as much factual responses as I possibly can, because the facts about coronavirus for the vast majority of people are going to be far less frightening than what they are seeing on the media. And probably the most important thing that I recommend to parents is to not let their kids be watching the news, to not let their kids be watching all of these accounts of the pandemic on social media. That's the scariest thing. You can really kind of get yourself so zoned in that it just overcomes you. And it's just fear on top of fear on top of fear, because that's what the media is selling. In reality, the majority of these folks, if you look at the state paper, not to call out the state paper, but what's the headline every single day? X number of new cases and X number of new deaths. But what's the reality? Those, quote, cases are simply positive tests. Lots and lots and lots of those people aren't sick at all. Even nursing home patients, lots of them aren't sick at all. And then these numbers of death on top of death on top of death, those are just folks who died after being diagnosed with coronavirus, after having a positive test. It doesn't mean they died from coronavirus. That's not the same thing at all. But people don't understand that. So the front page of the state paper every single day is doing nothing but creating fear. The reality of it isn't the same thing. So you absolutely can have an honest conversation and tell people that the reality is, yeah, this is a really nasty virus and a lot of people are getting sick, but a lot of people are not. And there are things that we can do to help keep ourselves safe. There are things that we can do to help people who do get sick. And that we're all going to work together and we're all going to help ourselves get through this without the media.
Thank you for that.
Dr. Greenhouse, I love your reiteration to call you and ask. I love the idea of, again, using those helpers, using the relationships of people we know and we have trust with. We talk a lot about this in Reach Out and Read, and the relationship that parents have with their children's healthcare provider. It's a very special relationship, and it really does provide you the opportunity to engage with an expert a human being, not a screen, not an agenda-driven source in any way, and just get some good human to human advice. And I think it's a really lovely reiteration to connect with the people around us that really can help us.
That we are spending an inordinate amount of time each day right now, in addition to seeing well children in the office and sick children out in the parking lot. But we are spending lots and lots of time just talking to folks, trying to allay their fears about this.
Yeah.
Because I think that you're right. They know us. And
Yeah.
I hope that they trust us and that they trust
Very
our
much.
opinions of where their risk really is, and then the things they just really don't need to be afraid of right now.
Very much. Very much.
So with just a few minutes left, I'd like to offer you ladies a chance to share any takeaways you want our viewers to have before we end this.
My takeaway would be to find the positive in all of this, that the resilience lies in coming together as a family and building upon your strengths as a family, recognizing your weaknesses, absolutely, working together, reaching out to the helpers, as Kristine said, and then realizing we're all in this together. We will get through this together, and a lot of us will be stronger and will grow from this as a result. And then we'll have something to tell our grandchildren down the road.
Yeah. I agree very much. Finding the ways to see the optimism through it. We're not stuck in this. We're moving through it together. And really focusing on the fact that even on our hard days or difficult days, we, the adults and the caregivers, are what our children need the most. Whether we're perfect, where we never are, or whether we're just good, or whether we even had a pretty rough day. You and a little bit of your love and attention and a story together, that's what your children need the most. And it might also be what you need the most.
Think about 3 points of the day where you have touch points with your kids. Think about who your special person is that you can talk to about what's going on in your world, your fears, your joys. Encourage your children to have another adult that they do that with as well. And be a gracious receiver. If the COVID's hit you hard financially, emotionally, physically, think about who the helpers are in your community. And if you don't know who they are, pick up the United Way 211 and call and ask somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, ladies, again for joining tonight. Just kind of want to remind everyone, just from my end, as we attempt to build resilience in the communities that we serve and everywhere at this moment, just based on the pandemic, I just encourage everyone to remain optimistic and continue to strive for progress and not be paralyzed by, these difficult times. The most challenging experiences often do lend the greatest opportunities for growth.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate enough to play professional football in the National Football League for over a decade, and as tough as it was to compete with some of the greatest athletes in the world, it really did pale in comparison to trying to figure out like this next phase of my life after retirement. And mainly because I had no idea what that looked like and what I was looking for. Like attempting to navigate the unknown in a world that doesn't feel familiar to you anymore isn't easy. But that journey somehow is always painfully beautiful, and is learning to embrace that uncertainty has been essential in building my own resolve, despite experiencing life as a Black male in America with all the disadvantages and inequalities and disparities that, we continue to preach about. I make a conscious decision every single day to believe in the hope of that new day and to trust the goodness of the human spirit. Like, it's just part of who I am. And that in itself is enough to make me to continue to fight, to do better and be better for the next generation and for my neighbor. So I would encourage us all to kind of take a chance on that hope and remain optimistic, and let that be enough to spark a fire within you that's stronger than any fire that may be burning around you right now. And let us all continue to, build a healthier community. But thank you, ladies, again for taking time out to join us tonight. Thank you to viewers for taking time out to join us tonight. And I hope to meet all of you pretty soon. So thank everyone again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Take good care.
Bye.